thought it would be useful for the House to be brought up to date on the working of my department after the referendum of the 23rd of June. Our instructions from the British people are clear. Britain is leaving the European Union. The mandate for that course is overwhelming. The referendum of June the 23rd delivered a bigger vote for Brexit than that won by any UK government in history. It's a national mandate, and this government is determined to deliver it in the national interest. And the Prime Minister has made clear there will be no attempt to stay in the EU by the back door, no attempt to delay, frustrate or thwart the will of the British people, no attempt to engineer a second referendum, because some people didn't like the first answer. The people have spoken in a referendum offered to them by this government and confirmed by Parliament, by all of us on both sides of the argument, and we must all respect it. That's a simple matter of democratic politics. Now, naturally, people want to know what Brexit will mean. Simply, it means leaving the European Union. So we will decide on our borders, our laws, and the taxpayers' money. It means getting the best deal for Britain, one that's unique to Britain, and not an off-the-shelf solution. This must mean controls on the numbers of people who come to Britain from Europe, but also a positive outcome for those who wish to trade in goods and services. This is a historic and positive moment for our nation. Brexit's not about making the best of a bad job. It's about seizing a huge and exciting opportunity that will flow from a new place for Britain in the world. There'll be new freedoms, new opportunities, new horizons for our country. And we can get the right trade policy for the UK. We can create a more dynamic economy, a beacon for free trade across the world. We want to make sure our regulatory environment helps rather than hinders businesses and workers. We can create an immigration system that allows us to control numbers and encourage the brightest and best to come to this country. But I want to be clear to our European friends and allies. We do not see Brexit as ending our relationship with Europe. It's about starting a new one. We want to maintain or even strengthen our cooperation on security and defence. It's in the interest of both the UK and the European Union that we have the freest possible trading relationship. We want a strong European Union succeeding economically and politically, working with Britain in many areas of common interest. So we should all approach the negotiations that come about our exit with a sense of mutual respect and cooperation. Now, I know the House will want to be updated about the work of the department. It's a privilege to have been asked to lead it by the Prime Minister, and the challenge we face is exciting and considerable. It will require significant expertise and a consistent approach. Negotiating with the EU has to be got right, and we are going to take the time to get it right. And we'll strive to build a national consensus around our approach. Now, we start from a position of economic strength. As the Prime Minister said yesterday, there will be challenges ahead. But our economy is robust, thanks in no small part to the work of my right honourable friend, the member for Tatton. The latest data suggest our manufacturing and service industries and consumer confidence are all strong, contrary to some of the predictions earlier. Businesses are putting their faith and their money into this country. Over the summer, SoftBank, GlaxoSmithKline, Siemens all confirmed that they will make major investments in the UK. Countries including Australia have already made clear their desire to proceed quickly with a new trade deal for the UK. As other nations see advantages to them, I am confident they will want to prioritise deals with the UK too. But we are not complacent. Our task, Mr. Speaker, is to build on this success and strength and negotiate a deal for exiting the European Union that's in the interest of the entire nation. Now, as I have already indicated, securing a deal that's in our national interest does not and must not mean turning our back on Europe. To do so would not be in our interest, nor Europe's. So we'll work hard to help establish a future relationship between the EU and the UK that's dynamic, constructive and healthy. We want a steadfast and successful European Union after we depart. And so, as we proceed, we will be guided by some clear principles. First, as I said, we wish to build a national consensus around our position. Second, we'll always put the national interest first. We will always act in good faith towards our European partners. Third, wherever possible, we'll try to minimise any uncertainty that change can inevitably bring. And fourthly, we will crucially, by the end of this process, have left the European Union and put the sovereignty and supremacy of this Parliament beyond doubt. The first formal step of the process of leaving the European Union is to invoke Article 50, which will start 2 years of negotiations. Let me briefly update the House on how the machinery of government will support our efforts and the next steps we'll take. First, responsibilities. The Prime Minister will lead the UK's exit negotiations and will be supported on a day-to-day basis by my department. We'll work closely with all government departments to develop our objectives and to negotiate new relationships with the EU and the rest of the world. Supporting me is a first-class ministerial team and some of the brightest and best in Whitehall who want to engage in this national endeavour. The department now has over 180 staff in London, plus the expertise over 120 officials in Brussels. And we're still growing rapidly with the first-class support from other departments. As for the next steps, the department's task is clear. We are undertaking 2 broad areas of work. First, given we're determined to build that national consensus, we're going to listen and talk to as many organisations, companies and institutions as possible, from the large PLCs to small businesses, from the devolved administrations through to councils, local government associations and major metropolitan bodies. We're already fully engaged with the governments of Scotland, Wales and Northern Ireland to ensure a UK-wide approach to our negotiations. The Prime Minister met the First Minister of Scotland and Wales and the First Minister and Deputy First Minister of Northern Ireland in July. And last week I visited Northern Ireland for meetings with its political leaders, where I reiterated our determination that there will be no return to the hard borders of the past. I'll visit Scotland and Wales soon. My ministerial colleagues and I have also discussed the next steps of the range of organisations. My first meeting was with the General Secretary of the Trade Union Congress, followed by key business groups, representatives of universities and charitable sectors, and farming and fisheries organisations. But this is just the start. In the weeks ahead, we'll speak to as many other firms, organisations and bodies as possible, research institutes, regional, national groups and businesses up and down the country, to establish their priorities and the opportunities for the whole of the UK. As part of this exercise, I can announce we'll be holding roundtables with stakeholders in a series of sectors to ensure all views to be reflected in our analysis for the options of the UK.
Order. The right honourable gentleman just resume his seat for a minute. There's quite a lot of unseemly, dare I say it, somewhat unstatesmanlike noise from a sedentary position. Somebody muttering, too long. It's not too long at all, the right honourable gentleman. It's perfectly in order. And let me just remind the House that it's always been my practice to facilitate the fullest and most extensive interrogation of the relevant minister. And that will happen today. Everybody will have his or her opportunity. But it would be a good thing if people would listen respectfully. If they can manage a beaming countenance reminiscent of that of the Foreign Secretary, that will be a bonus, but it is not obligatory. Secretary of State.
Those stakeholders include broadcast, aviation, energy, financial services, automotive and others. I'll also engage with the Member States. I'm beginning this with a visit to Dublin this week. I'm working particularly closely with the Foreign Secretary and Secretary of State for International Trade. They've been meeting counterparts in Washington, Brussels, Delhi and the capitals of other EU states. Whilst we do this, my officials, supported by officials across government, are carrying out a programme of sectoral analysis and regulatory analysis which will identify the key factors for some 50 sectors of British business. And that's extremely important for the House to understand. We're building a detailed understanding of how the withdrawal from the EU will affect the domestic policies to seize the opportunities and ensure a smooth process of exit. Now, Mr. Speaker, the referendum result was a clear sign that that the majority of the British people want to see Parliament's sovereignty strengthened. And so throughout this process, Parliament will be regularly informed, updated and engaged. Finally, we are determined to ensure that people have as much stability and certainty in the period leading up to our departure from the EU. Until we leave the European Union, we must respect the laws and obligations that membership requires of us. We also want to ensure certainty when it comes to public funding. The Chancellor has confirmed that structural and investment fund projects signed before the autumn statement and research and innovation projects financed by the European Commission granted before we leave the EU will be underwritten by the Treasury after we leave. Agriculture is a vital part of the economy, and the government will match the current level of annual payments that the sector receives through the direct payment scheme until 2020, again providing certainty. In terms of the position of EU nationals in the UK, the Prime Minister has been clear she is determined to protect the status of EU nationals already living here, and the only circumstances in which that would not be possible is if the British citizens' rights in European member states were not protected in return, something I frankly find very hard to imagine. I'm confident together we'll be able to deliver on what the country asked us to do through the referendum. I'm greatly encouraged by the national mood. Most of those who I've met who wanted to remain have accepted the result and now want to make a success of the course Britain has chosen. Indeed, organisations and individuals I've met already that back the Remain campaign now want to be engaged in the process of exit and are identifying positive changes that will flow from it as well as the challenges. I want us all to come together as one nation to get the best deal for Britain. Mr. Speaker, in conclusion, we are confident of negotiating a new position that will mean this country flourishing outside the European Union while keeping its members as friends, allies and trading partners. We will leave the European Union, but we will not...
Oh, hold on. The Honourable Member for Perth and North Perthshire is an aspiring statesman. His aspiration may be a little way from fulfilment, but I want to hear the Secretary of State's peroration. Secretary of State.
It's an aspiration of very long standing, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, in conclusion, we are confident of negotiating a position that will mean this country flourishing outside the EU, keeping its members as our friends, our allies and our trading partners. We will leave the European Union, but we will not turn our back on Europe.